So this is my October wrap up. I read a lot of books in October, not as much as I wanted to. I had like 25 books on my TBR, but I only read 13 books, but I think that's still a good amount of books. In October, I try to read more books that I owned versus books from the library. So I think I did pretty good considering. I have a big stack of books here that were on my shelf that I finally read. Some of these books were on my shelf for years. So anyways, let's just get into the wrap up. First up is a book that everyone has read except for me. I got this when I first started BookTube, I think, years ago, and this is You by Caroline Kepnes. Everyone probably knows all about this, so I won't say much about it. I gave it 2.5 or 3 stars, I think. It was way better on audiobook. I tried to read it, but I just couldn't get through it. I definitely would have DNF'd it if I didn't have the audiobook. The audiobook is a way better experience than reading it, so I definitely recommend that if you still haven't read this book. But yeah, I'm probably going to have this in the donate pile. Next up, another one that's been on my shelf for years. This is Horns. I got this a long time ago, like in the beginning of BookTube. I finally read it. This is another one that you probably know all about. It's this guy who wakes up one day and he has horns and he just hears all these honest thoughts from everybody he talks to. This was really good. I liked Nosferatu 2 better, but I know some people like Horns better. If you're looking to like dive into Stephen King books or Joe Hill books, this is a good place to start, I think. It was a really quick read, and if you're looking for a good audiobook, this was a good audiobook as well. So I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Tender is the Flesh. This was not what I expected at all. I had been seeing it floating around on BookTube. This one takes place in a world where an infectious virus has made all animal meat poisonous to humans. So now the government is letting people eat the special meat, which is just humans being processed to be eaten. So, and they're not normal humans, they're humans that are made specifically to eat. So if you have any kind of triggers, I don't recommend this. This is on that troop level, so if you did like the troop, you'll probably like this one. But I ended up giving this one 4 out of 5 stars, and I flew through it and I really enjoyed it. The next book I read was also on my shelf for years. I try to pick books that have been on my shelf for years. This one I think I got like 6 or 7 years ago. It's called In Malice Quite Close. So this is about a man who kidnaps a girl. He then marries her off to another man to keep up appearances, to make it seem like it's normal. And then the girl has a daughter, and the daughter stumbles upon these paintings that kind of bring back her past. So it's kind of like a mystery, I guess, but if you like kidnapping books, you might enjoy this one. I don't think this was executed the best way it could be, so I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars. It got a little boring in some parts, but it ended up being an okay read. I definitely recommend checking it out from your library instead of buying it. The next one I read has this cover, but I was stuck with this cover. Okay, this totally is not what the book is about. This is Invasion of the Body Snatchers. This is the classic sci-fi novel. If you haven't read it, I definitely recommend it. It's really, really short. This is about these aliens that start taking over the minds and bodies of neighbors in the town, and actually Stephen King blurbed it and said The Body Snatchers is a good story, one to be read and savored for its own unique satisfaction. So definitely recommend this if you're looking to dive into classic sci-fi. This is a good place to start, I think, because it's a really short book and it was really good. I enjoyed it. But I ended up giving that one 4 out of 5 stars, and like I said, I definitely recommend picking that one up. The next one I read was disappointing. I know some people loved it, and I just am so glad that I keep reading hyped reads from the library, because I'm just constantly disappointed by hyped up reads. But this one is Leave the World Behind. The thing about this book is it would have read better if it was marketed and been sold as a short story. If it was a short story, then it would have gotten a 4 out of 5 stars. But because it was a full-length novel and marketed as a thriller, that's just really misleading. So I ended up giving it, I think, 2.5, rounded up to a 3, but more of a 2-star. Nothing really happened at all. Even though nothing happened, I did finish it in one day because I thought like something was about to happen. So it did read quickly for me, but it just didn't do it for me. Sorry, I have the boy here. He's on my lap. He's been he always, I don't know what it is, but he loves watching me film. You love watching me film, huh? He sits right behind the right next to the camera and watches me film, but he wanted to lay on my lap, so he's here. The next book I read was The Girl with All the Gifts. This was almost a DNF. My brother raved about this book. If you've been here for a long time, you know my brother started a channel around the time when I started BookTube, and he was reading a lot and he read this and loved it, so I let him keep it for his collection. And then one of my friends got this copy for me. I think it was for my birthday or something a few years later. And yeah, I'm really disappointed because my brother loved it and I know a lot of other people loved it too, but me and Ashley ended up buddy reading this and she ended up DNFing it, and I almost DNF'd it, but I listened to the audiobook and then I tried to push myself and read through the rest, but I ended up giving the book 2 out of 5 stars and I don't recommend it, and it's going in that pile with You and In Malice Come Close. The next book has also been on my bookshelf for years, and it's The Road to Jonestown, and this is about Jim Jones and People's Temple, and it was really interesting to dive deeper into Jim Jones's life and his background because I didn't know much about him besides being the Kool-Aid guy. I didn't have any background information on Jim Jones himself or the people who joined the People's Temple, and yeah, this was really good. I definitely recommend this if you want to listen to the audiobook. Definitely recommend for nonfiction November if you're looking for something. This was really good, and it is a little thick, but it goes really quickly. I read the last 100 pages or so physically, and I read the beginning physically too, and a few parts, and yeah, it went really quickly. So yeah, this one is definitely one I'm going to keep, and I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. The next one, I guess, is a look into a future book haul. I put away all the books I was going to haul though, so I don't even remember like what I haven't hauled yet on this channel, but this is Confessions, and I really wanted to read this, and my friend Destiny, which she has a YouTube channel too if you want to check out. She does a lot of vlogs and like lifestyle stuff. I will link her channel down below if you want to check her out, but she got this for me for my birthday, and I was so excited because it was the perfect Halloween read. So this is about a teacher whose students have murdered her daughter, and that's what it says on the back. Her pupils murdered her daughter, and now she will have her revenge. So this was a really good book. I really enjoyed it. It's very short. You'll read it in like a day or so. And yeah, I'm excited to check out more by this author, and I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. The next one has also been on my shelf for years, but I was so excited to finally read it. I don't know what took me so long, and it's Dark Places by Gillian Flynn. I had read Gone Girl, I think it was 2012 maybe, and I didn't like it as much as everyone else did. I think I gave it 3 out of 5 stars or 3.5, but I know people loved that book, but I definitely like this book way better. So if you haven't read this, or if you're late to the game like I am, this is about a girl named Libby whose mom and 2 sisters are murdered. Libby survives and testifies that her brother was the killer, and he was the one that murdered everybody. So the story follows that. It was a page turner, and I really enjoyed it. It was a nice, good October read, and definitely recommend this if you haven't read it yet, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read also has been on my shelf for a while, and it's Fragments of Horror by Junji Ito. I've read a few of his. If you see my shelf, I have a whole part of my shelf dedicated to his manga, so I've read some of his stuff. This wasn't my favorite, but I still, as always, enjoy the illustrations, and I gave this 3.5 out of 5 stars, I believe. The next book I read also has been on my shelf for years, and it's Pet Sematary. I really am surprised how much I enjoyed this one. This is supposedly Stephen King's scariest book. He has a new intro in here that's a few pages, and I read the intro, and it's Stephen King saying how this is personally the scariest book he's ever written because it's inspired by where he lived at one point. He lived by a busy road, and his son was going towards the road, but Stephen King doesn't remember if his son tripped or if he grabbed his son. He says like he doesn't remember what happened, but like what if his son would have gotten like ran over or something, like what would have happened, like a what if. He also said that the pet cemetery part was also inspired by where he lived because it was a busy road. A lot of people's pets would get ran over, so they did have a pet cemetery by that busy road because of that. So that intro by Stephen King was really cool to read about, and yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I think this is one of Stephen King's saddest books, if there is such a thing, but I've read about like 12 of his books now, I think, and this is really up there. I don't think this is in my top 3, but I think it's in my top 5, and I definitely recommend this if you haven't read it yet. And I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. Loved it. So the last book I read was Chainsaw Confidential, and this was a book that I own on my Kindle, and it was a book that I had been wanting to read for a while, and it's about the OG version of Texas Chainsaw, the one that came out in the 70s, I believe. And yeah, I read the book and then I watched the movie, and I definitely recommend reading this if you're interested in how they made that movie. I know it's like cringy and corny now because it's so old, but if you read the book, then you find out like how the blood was real, some of the cuts were real, how they had to be in like 120-degree weather in the car while filming. I think a lot of those things made me like the movie even more. So if you're a fan of the movie, I definitely recommend reading this before watching the movie again and doing a rewatch, or if you've never seen the movie, definitely recommend watching it after you read this book. I ended up giving this 3.5 out of 5 stars, and it was a pretty good read. So those were all the books I read in October. You will see some vlogs coming up because I filmed a weekly vlog that I have to upload still. Let me know if you read any of these books or what you thought of these books, or if you want to read them, or anything you want to say. Let's talk in the comments down below. I love talking to people in the comments down below and replying and stuff. And yeah, I will see you in the next video.